Hello, my fellow gamers, and welcome to this month's video where I am going to talk about the Horrors Within a little bit, just like everybody else this month, because it's the new D&D product and it's very exciting and content timely or something like that. No, sort of something like that. You can see I actually pre-ordered on Roll20, partly because, as much as I love having the physical book, I got caught in a little bit of FOMO from their pre-order perks, and also because when my Curse of Strahd campaign inevitably ends and I want to transition into a wider Ravenloft thing, like I think a lot of people do, or at least enjoy the idea of, and one of my players is talking about moving, so we might have to play online, and getting a couple resources for that, a couple extra maps and cool tokens seemed like a good thing. But what I'm really here to talk about is it also came with this Ezmerelda's Guide to Ravenloft. And this is a really cool product all on its own. It was actually written back around the time of the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft book came out. So it's for 5e. Obviously 5.5 conversions to your own need. And that's partly what I wanted to do today, is talk about one of the subclasses in this book that I just found really cool and really inspiring. And as much as I'm adding to my list of characters I'll probably never get to play playlist, not actually a real thing at the time of recording, to be clear. But yeah, there's a really cool subclass in this book that I saw and immediately was like, ooh, I want to make a character about this. And it sort of fit into something I had just been thinking about earlier that week. So we're just a little different here. We might touch on some of the Horrors Within content. We're really here to enjoy this excellent product by Jack Wayhill, published I think by the CZ RPG. I've seen them on the DM's Guild before. They've got a bunch of stuff, so I think they're a publisher for independent authors for DM's Guild packages. Lots of good, great themed stuff here. I've definitely picked up some of these before. Like, they got a bunch of stuff for Ravenloft that I think I've might have used at some point. Anywho, this Ezmerelda's Guide seems really great. I haven't read it all the way through just yet, but I noticed they have like the Lichen, which might be interesting to compare to the Lupin from Horrors Within, since this came out and sort of filled that niche before the actual game got around to doing it. And they've got a bunch of their own unique domains. So yeah, if this seems cool to you, maybe check it out on DM's Guild or whatever you use. I think Grimpress DM's Guild, they're like the people who converted this for Roll20. I couldn't find anything more about them. They don't have any... The products page for them is broken too, it seems. And it's like they don't exist on DM's Guild either. I don't know what to make of this. Anyway, look at all these NPCs and monsters that the product comes with, and it was free with the pre-order, so that was my FOMO kicking in. I have a bit of a bad habit about that, but I'm not sad, because look at all this cool stuff. I hope the author's getting a kickback for the giveaway here, because this is a great one. And speaking of the Lupin speaking of the Lichen predicting the Lupin in the latest Horrors Within book, this designer also predicted the Reanimator with the Stitcher Artificer subclass. So I don't know if seeing these side by side is something you're interested in. Either just go pick it up yourself, or let me know if you want me to see about making a video. I'm curious to put them side by side and sort of see the two approaches. Obviously, Ezmerelda's Guide was a 5e resource, and the Horrors Within is the new shiny product that everybody's talking about. Anyway, all right, let's get into it. It's the Dread Knight Fighter subclass that inspired me so much, because it sounds cool as heck. The flavor text says, Dread Knights forcibly exert control over shadow itself, coalescing rings of swirling shadow that suck the life out of all those they face. The visage of a Dread Knight is often tainted by the shadows they channel, causing their mere presence to send chills down the spines of others. Warriors of the Dread Domain sometimes turn to the darkness for power. The strongest of these warriors become Dread Knights. Right? My inner edgelord is just salivating at the chance to play something like this, right? In battle, Dread Knights wield the darkness as a weapon, enveloping themselves and their weapons in ravenous shadow. And that sounds awesome. I didn't necessarily get the weapon enveloping out of the subclass features, but we'll kind of get into analyzing those in a minute. Obviously, if you had a weapon, my immediate thought went to the Ebonbane, which is also a quote-unquote Dark Lord of Ravenloft. Minor spoilers? I don't know. But like, that'd be a cool weapon to use with this. However, since I really want to play it, obviously my silly optimizer brain started getting out and creating what should be a really effective character to use this. And there's a particular mechanic that the subclass uses which encourages attacking. And so fitting in a longsword into that equation could actually be tricky. Otherwise, like I'm picturing a decked out, all black, full plate armor, probably something like the Oathbreaker Paladin in BG3. Just intimidating looking scary dude, and like maybe sword and board kind of style. With that Ebon Bane blade would be pretty cool. Maybe that's 20th level, though. We gotta get there first. So this is a fighter subclass. You get your subclasses at level 3, no matter which version you're playing, 5e, 5.5. And we get a couple features with this subclass. The first one's called Dread Sight. It says, your gaze pierces the darkness and you gain dark vision out to 120 feet. And then it goes on to explain basically how dark vision works. But this is actually very important because seeing in dim light as if it was bright light becomes basically necessary because of a feature we get later that creates the shadows swirling around us and makes everything dim light in that radius. So you're pretty much, with this subclass, constantly going to be surrounding yourself with dim light. So this is pretty much a must-have. And I suppose technically dark vision says you can see in dim light within the specified range as if it was bright light, and darkness within a range as if it was dim light, but then goes on to say you discern colors in that darkness only as shades of gray. So is this sentence actually redundant, or are they trying to say that you don't have that additional dark vision restriction, the shades of gray, which I think a lot of people forget about. You know, it's kind of like black and white sort of style, which makes the contrasts really visible, but might mean it's a little harder to make certain things out. Color in particular, obviously. But since this sentence reiterates that and then doesn't add any further stipulation like dark vision normally does, I don't know. Ask your DM. And they include the feature that if you already had dark vision, you get an extra 60 feet. So that's nice. You could have like 180 feet if you play the right species. And then this is really great. When you reach 7th level, which is when you get your next fighter subclass level up, essentially, you also convert your dark vision to see through magical darkness. So you essentially get the Devil's Sight Warlock invocation to see through magical darkness for free at level 7 with your Dread Sight. So that's pretty great. By level 7, I don't know if you're still using the darkness tactic, but I think it's a really nice gimme for the subclass to get that, and it makes a lot of sense just considering how strong the theme is about darkness and shadows. So I'm good with it. I might even say just give it to them at 3rd level. That's probably when your warlock is also going to take the Devil's Sight invocation, if not at level 2, but they don't get darkness until 2nd level spell slots, level 3. So they're probably at level 3 if they want to be using the darkness. If you have a warlock in the party, they're going to be doing it at level 3 and you're just at level 3. It would really be nice to make playing with darkness a lot more viable if right at level 3 when you start doing it, 2 of the party members can do it. Like maybe there's a balance thing to waiting fighters, even like if they're a caster, that might be closer to like the Eldritch Knight gets 2nd level spell slots at level 7, so that's kind of when they should be able to cast darkness. But we're not casting it here, we're just seeing through it maybe. So honestly, for the reason alone that when darkness might enter the party, it would be very nice and synergistic. I might say I would prefer to have them get it right away so they can start playing with the warlock or the sorcerer, depending on, we got a shadow sorcerer subclass now, and they can see through their own magical darkness. This one doesn't have any stipulations. You just see through all magical darkness as if it was non-magical darkness. So my opinion, more fun, just give it to them. Your whole thing is being the shadow fighter, right? We'll allow it. To be clear, this is for me in my design philosophy. Like I'm not a designer by trade. I just know D&D pretty well because of obsession. And all my comments here are basically vibes from reading it and thinking about how I want to convert to 5.5 if I wanted to play this, and what feels fair to me and what I would feel good about bringing to a DM that is for something that is essentially homebrew, third party, non-official, something to bring to the game and say, hey, this would be cool for a character that I want to play. Would you allow me to play this? And wanting to bring them something that isn't overpowered and way out of line of anything and feels good to play. So I want to try to be as fair as possible, but still make sure that it feels good and it retains its coolness. All right, that out of the way, we get Ominous Presence, which is basically kind of like a ribbon feature when you consider things, but it's a fun one. But to be honest, you could cut this whole thing and it wouldn't be a big deal. However, we're a dread knight, so it's nice to see we are playing into that dread factor right at subclass level 3 when we get this. So your visage drives fear into those around you. You gain proficiency in intimidation. Hopefully you don't already have it if you've been planning to play this subclass since the beginning. I think in a lot of the updated design, it would say something more like you gain proficiency in the intimidation skill. And then if you already have proficiency in intimidation, you would gain a different fighter skill that you don't already have. Since it's a fighter subclass, that makes sense. Or if you're feeling generous, you could say if you already have proficiency in intimidation, you gain expertise. Fighters don't usually get expertise from things unless it's very specific, but to really drive home the Dread Knight aspect, expertise, that might be fun. Although you'll read the rest, I think you can tell you don't necessarily need it. Because additionally, Thaumaturgy and Charisma is your spellcasting ability for it, and you can cast without spell components. So the only component in Thaumaturgy, when I looked it up, is a verbal component. So you can do it subtly with maybe that matters. It feels good because then it's just aura, dude. It's just aura. And then because this was designed during 5e, they go on to say that when you cast Thaumaturgy, you can do an effect that drives more fear and get advantage on your next Charisma Intimidation check. You don't have to say that anymore because 5.5e's Thaumaturgy already includes this advantage via the Booming Voice option. So if I was doing 5.5 conversion, I would probably just cut all this and just say you get the Thaumaturgy cantrip. And if you want to say without verbal components, well, I don't know. Booming Voice already lets you say something to be the saying something and sounding booming and scary is already kind of the verbal component. So I don't even know if that matters. I suppose this is just being vague about it, like produce an effect designed to strike fear, just because you can do the altered eyes, you can do the fire play, making flames flicker and burn bigger or lower or whatever it is. You can make sounds like crackling thunder, so any of those things. This opens it up so that instead of just the built-in Booming Voice option, you could do any of those things, which I think is fair because if you make a thunder crack outside at just the right moment using Thaumaturgy, and because you don't have to say anything verbally to make it happen, you can just give a look, cast the cantrip, using your will, and create a crackling thunder to give somebody a jump as part of your intimidation. This is giving you free reign permission. So I would say actually keep it just like it is. It just makes casting Thaumaturgy that much easier to manifest the effect that you want to get that juicy Dread Lord Knight scary dude vibes. I say dude, female inclusive, and all gender inclusive dude. Anyway, for what essentially feels like a ribbon, it's actually really cool and effective in a lot of ways. So it leans into the Dread Knight feature perfectly. The Ominous Presence is chef's kiss. Moving on to the last feature we get at level 3 with this subclass, Rising Darkness. This is the main feature thing that you're basically taking this for. The other things like Dark Vision and your Ominous Presence are just reinforcing the theme, I guess. But this is the main bread and butter of what you're getting out of this in terms of combat and damage and such. I got a lot of thoughts about it, especially trying to recontextualize playing this subclass from its design, a 5e, translating into a 5.5e game and what that means. And essentially for me, it boils down to 5.5e has a lot easier of a time because weapon masteries like Nick and Cleave can essentially give optimizers an extra attack per round versus what was available in 5e, potentially. Plus, masteries like Vex can drastically increase the amount of advantage you're getting, and I think overall advantage is almost easier to get in a lot of ways. So with more advantage, you just might be hitting more, and the main feature of this, let's get into it. Your strikes conjure a mounting whirlwind of shadows that tears apart your foes. I guess that's your flavor in terms of enveloping your weapons in shadow, but it says whenever you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you gain a point of darkness, essentially darkness points, up to a maximum amount equal to twice your proficiency bonus. And I think this alone is a elegant piece of design because it's nice and simple. From levels 1 to 4, you're going to have 4 darkness points. From levels 5 to 8, you'll have 6. 9 to 12, you'll have 8. 13 to 15, you'll have 10. And 16 to 20, you'll have up to 12 darkness points available. And this will all kind of come into play as we get more features in this subclass, but it really helps to contextualize the scaling when we get there. So we'll come back to that. The main thing I was talking about with advantage and weapon masteries was because it says when you hit with a weapon attack, that's at +1 darkness points every hit, which to me, even in 5e, would have incentivized, especially at early levels, because using your bonus action, but 2-weapon fighting. Before we had Nick, which lets us get away with not actually using our bonus action and saving our action economy on that, 2-weapon fighting would have meant you're at level 3 getting 2 attacks per round instead of 1, which means you can build up your darkness points faster. And that still applies in 5.5, although now it's just even easier. So your rate to gain, I mean, again, it's double your proficiency. You only have 4 maximum at the moment, but essentially optimizing this means making as many attacks as possible with your weapons on your turn. It then goes on to say that if you then have 3 or more darkness, you manifest a 10-foot radius swirling vortex of shadow. 10-foot radius. In 5.5e, we might just call this an emanation, and also incapacitated in 5.5e is a little different. In 5e, it was just can't take actions or reactions. 5.5, you can't take any actions, bonus actions, or reactions, although I think actions include bonus actions theoretically, so not a real change, just a clarification. No concentration, you can't speak, disadvantage on the attack roll. I think infamously, the fact you can still move threw a lot of people off, but you're just lower capacitated. But honestly, that is to say, all of that's fine. I wouldn't change a thing. And obviously the shadow suppression for incapacitated carries over into things like unconscious. And here I was mentioning before, the shadow spreads around corners and its area turns bright light into dim light. So you're going to be constantly in dim light, which is why dark vision is a must and was included earlier. And then this vortex lasts until you end your turn with less than 3 darkness points. The thing is, until you're level 7, the subclass doesn't give you really any way to spend darkness points you've accumulated, so theoretically you're going to get up to 4 or even 6 at level 5 and just have that until you're level 7 where you're going to get some features that let you spend them. It goes on later to say about how you end up losing your darkness. So this is the limiting factor. If 1 minute passes and you haven't dealt damage to a hostile creature or taken damage from a hostile creature or a trap, you lose all your accrued darkness points. Also, if you fall unconscious or die. So that's getting knocked to 0 HP or potentially just falling asleep to like the sleep spell, for example. Essentially, the fantasy of it is are probably gonna start off with 0 darkness every combat because 1 minute is not a very long time. Like even moving from one room to another, like if you really gun for it, you know, maybe you end a combat and immediately charge into another room and trigger another initiative or something, if you're lucky, and maybe get some kind of chain. It's the common problem with all kinds of 1 minute concentration spells or 1 minute effects and stuff. Can you push it, or is it really just what we're really saying here is this combat and not much else? So what I'm getting here is, in theory, every combat we're going to start at 0 darkness points and we're going to accrue some during the course of the fight over however many rounds the combat lasts, because you only get it when you hit a creature, remember. And let's just say you're not optimizing and you just normally just have one attack per round and maybe a 60-65% chance to hit depending on how you average. I think it's something like that on average for most monsters, assuming, you have all your primary abilities and everything set up. The point is, to get your swirling vortex going, you need 3 darkness points, which could mean it doesn't even activate until the 3rd round of combat, at which point the combat might be over. So there is the potential, especially if you're missing, that you never even see this thing turn on, and that could feel bad. But I do think you kind of have to earn it, because what it gives you, I haven't even talked about yet, and I think I'm almost worried it's too good, but it's definitely cool as heck. So while you get your vortex on, not only do you have a dim light, shadowy presence within a 10-foot emanation, whenever a hostile creature starts its turn in that shadow, it must make a Constitution saving throw. It's 8 plus proficiency plus your charisma modifier, which, let's be honest, it doesn't call it out, but this subclass wishes it had a spellcasting modifier and that it's charisma. So it's your spell save DC Constitution save, basically. The creature takes a D6 necrotic damage or half on a success. So either way, you're getting a little bit of damage out. I think the average 3.5 or half of that's 1 3/4. So you might be getting consistently on every creature within 10 feet of you that start their turn there, 2 or more necrotic damage every round. Plus, if you have more than 3 darkness, now, keep in mind at level 3, we'll have up to 4, and we're not going to be able to spend them on anything, so we're pretty much going to cap at 4. The damage dealt increases by 1 for every point of darkness you have beyond 3, so plus 1. So it's a d6 plus 1, which means, now we're doing 2 or 3 damage almost guaranteed per round for the successful save, or more. We could be doing 6-7 damage if we're lucky, but that's really good. And we've got scaling. So fighters scale at 7, 15, and 18. The scaling's lovely to have. It means that this doesn't just become a lame feature later on, especially since we're going to be able to turn this on and add to the positive above 3 additional damage modifier really easily as we gain more proficiency levels. So 5 to 8 and 9 to 12, 13 to 15. So when you think about it, and when I'm thinking about the balance, I'm maybe getting a little focused on the higher levels and how much potential damage it could be doing, but you get up to, your level 9, you could be doing plus 5 and 2d6 necrotic damage essentially for free. And it's half of 2d6, not half of the total. More darkness above 3 is just plus 1 on top of whatever they end up getting for their con save. Yeah, so that scales really well. The only thing about it, the only thing that's really holding it back is the fact that you're probably always starting at 0 every fight, and you get scarier and scarier the longer you're in that fight. So I hear things like rounds of combat on average don't go beyond 4 for most encounters. And you gotta think, how are you gonna build up your darkness points round by round to have this going? Again, at level 3, we're getting 1, maybe 2 attacks per round. To get up to 3 darkness, that could be probably at least 3 rounds before it's going to start. Now, at level 5, as a fighter, you're going to get extra attack. So now you're attacking twice per round. You're essentially doubling the amount of dread points that you could be getting. And at level 5, now we have 6 darkness points. So we could have a plus 3 when we cap it to our aura. And we're getting our aura online probably by the end of round 2 with at least 3 or 4 darkness points. And if we're 2-weapon fighting in 5e or 5.5 or cleaving in 5.5, we're maybe getting a 3rd attack, which means we could be anywhere from online on round 1 to maxed by the end of round 2 if we hit all 6 of our attacks, which might be a lot easier too, especially 2-weapon fighting. If you use a scimitar to nick and a short sword to vex, you've got advantage potentially if you hit with Vex, Chain Advantage, 2 short sword attacks, 1 scimitar attack, yeah, your chance to be turning on this feature a lot faster goes way, way up as soon as you hit level 5. And so it's after level 5, and especially by level 7 when you get some more options and your damage goes up, that I do start to worry a little bit about just how good this is. But it's still very situational. I just said, it's maybe by the end of round 1 you get to do it, which bumping up your damage and actually ensuring that the feature's going off by the time you're at least level 5 is probably a good thing. And you never know the situation. Like, a 10-foot radius around you means you're a melee character. Like, let's not even kid ourselves. You want to be as close to your enemy as possible so that they're within your radius. But who's to say how many enemies you're really even going to be fighting at once that you can get that close with? Even 10 feet radius, it's a pretty good size. Okay, let's say you're this guy. Needed a smaller map. Okay, so there we go. 10 foot all around you. Radius looks something like this. Essentially 5x5 means there's up to, if I had enemies in every potential square, never minding the fact that this dungeon isn't big enough to support that in these corridors, we'd have 25 minus you, 24 potentially creatures that could be affected by our 10-foot aura. Could be 0, could be 12, could be 24. I expect you're not going to be fighting 24 monsters at once. Heck, I don't even think you're necessarily mobbing with 12 at once. At least not who are going to be positioned such that you're completely surrounding them or surrounding you. I think you're probably going to have 1, 2, most of the time if you're lucky, maybe 3 or 4, heck, maybe even 5. But the idea that you're going to be... I don't know your game, but I doubt you're going to have more than 6 at a time. Still, 6 people, probably maybe at most, within a 10-foot radius, are going to be rolling their con saves and taking this necrotic damage. Now, this kind of brings me around to a point that I need to make, which is a creature starting its turn in the shadow. This could get really annoying at the table, because it's at the start of each creature's turn, so you're going to constantly be asking the DM, roll a con save for this creature, roll a con save for this creature. Could really slow the game down, could get really annoying. You have to constantly be reminding them. And just because of the timing, it kind of makes sense that it's more tactical. You're more likely to be able to position yourself at the end of your turn somewhere where you can see enemies are within your radius. So there is, it's nice. It feels good tactically, but it also kind of almost guarantees that you are probably positioning yourself in such a way that the creature is going to start their turn already within your aura. So I'm going to suggest a quick fix to this could be, if you want to maintain that level of tactical positioning at the end of your turn and also kind of guaranteeing that the creatures that are within your radius aura with your darkness or shadows vortex, they're going to have to start their turn more or less where you end your turn. Where you end your turn, just make that the trigger. So whenever a hostile creature is within your radius, when you end your turn, have them roll their con save right then and there. Lets the DM take care of it all at once. It's probably not going to change between the end of your turn and the start of their turn unless you have allies pushing and repositioning either of you. So, I mean, sure, but take that edge case out and say probably not necessarily. And this is it just makes it all smoother, cleaner, faster, easier. And fundamentally doesn't change that much. If you say make them roll at the start of your turn, it solves the same problem, but it does take away your ability to sort of force it by just making sure you're ending your turn where they're within your radius, because that essentially forces it. It leaves a little bit more room for tactics where the enemy has some counterplay and is not necessarily being forced to be within your aura and forced to make those saving throws, which in a way I think feels a little bit better speaking as a DM in terms of just having some counterplay. Maybe makes it a little bit more interesting, but it could also mean that you just never get to use this because the enemies are constantly running away far enough out of your aura that they're just never starting their turn there because they know better. And so if you never get an enemy within your aura, it's like a dead feature. Just like if you never hit with a weapon attack, it's a dead feature. So as powerful as it is, trying to keep in mind how many turns does it take to get up before you even start doing this damage? How often are you going to be able to apply it to hopefully as many enemies within range as possible? And how much extra damage are we really doing? Because we have to get up to 3, 4, 6 darkness points over maybe 1, 2, 3 rounds. And maybe the combat's over by the 4th round, and you only end up really doing 6 or 7 extra damage to like 2 different enemies, let's say, at the end of the day. How great really is that? On paper, just reading through it, my first reaction was just like, oh my god, this is so good. But like now I've really sat with it and I've thought about it. It's still really powerful feeling, but you're not necessarily getting online with it and positioning yourself in such a way that you're able to take advantage of it to its what seems like a really powerful maximum. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to compare it in my head to other, let's say, fighters and how much extra damage they might be able to be squeezing out. Like the Eldritch Knight, for example, at level 7, they get their extra attack with a cantrip. Like, so they could be adding an extra d8's worth of damage, I don't know, with a Booming Blade or something. Maybe 2d8, maybe 3d8 by level 5, right? Because you get the 1 with the hit and the plus and the 2 if they move, or Green Flame Blade, same idea. So yeah, that's to 1 target. We could be getting 2d6 to 2 or 3 different targets. And the fact that it's half on a success plus the additional, it does seem really strong. I'm gonna say it feels strong, but they're doing that every round from round 1, whereas we might take a minute to get there. So I don't know. I've really gone back and forth on this, if you couldn't tell, about what's too strong. Should it cost more? Like, I thought about, should it cost 4 to activate the darkness just to start off with, especially in the 5.5e context where there's so much more advantage. Maybe 1 more attack than you were expecting to be able to do to build it up faster, even from level 5. You gotta let me know what you think. But all that said, whenever you action surge or second wind, which you get more of now too, I believe, you also gain darkness equal to your proficiency bonus. So by level 5, your +3 proficiency bonus means you're turning this on right away. If you use action surge on round 1, you're definitely doing it, and then however many attacks you do. So the fact that you get action surges and second winds back just even on short rests, I think it's a really good feature to have with it, because that it just means that you're not sort of stuck desperately trying to turn on your feature. But part of me thinks you should struggle a little bit to get there, just depending on how good this is. Again, it's all about positioning and the situational nature of it. Like 1v1, it adds a little bit of extra damage. It's like Hex or Hunter's Mark extra damage, but a little bit better even, and kind of for free. I don't know. The reason I'm really grappling with this, you don't even know yet, is because at level 7, it starts to get a little crazy. Because we get a couple features. Weapons of Fear is one of them, which lets you spend your points. I'll go over that in a sec. But Reaching Darkness is more relevant to what we're talking about at the second. Essentially, once you reach 6 darkness points, so let's say starting at level 5 and then at level 7 when you get this, you have up to 6 darkness points available to you. Come level 9, you'll be able to have up to 8, and then you have to wait till you're level 13, essentially, to get to the next tier. The next tier being 9 to 11 darkness points changes the radius to 30 feet. So essentially what this means is round 1 of a fight, you go in, you're level 7. You attack once with your short sword, you get extra attack, so you attack again with your short sword, hopefully with advantage from hitting the first time with Vex. You then hopefully have advantage on your light weapon plus Nick weapon mastery attack with a scimitar, which you're able to swap each weapon out fairly easily, thanks to the rule being each attack can draw or stow 1 weapon. So your first attack you can draw with your short sword attack, second attack attack with your short sword and then stow. Third attack, draw your scimitar, then attack. And then maybe you have hopefully at least 1 darkness point, maybe 2, maybe even 3 darkness points. You action surge. That right there already gives you 3 extra. So you've already hit your 10-foot radius. And then you go ahead and guarantee that you're probably hitting your 6 cap at level 7 or 8 cap at level 9, because then you're making another 2 attacks, which could be with, well, if you're holding your scimitar, you got to attack with that first, put it away. You don't necessarily get nick again because it's once per turn, but you pull back out your short sword, you're vexing again, you're hopefully hitting, getting advantage on your next attack. But we've made 2 to 3 attacks if we're dual wielding or cleaving, potentially, plus action surge for another 2 attacks. That's 4 or 5 attacks plus automatically getting action surges. And yeah, probably round 1 we're immediately activating our Reaching Darkness, assuming we want to spend the action surge resources. But at least round 1 we're getting our 10-foot radius, if not now a 20-foot radius. So it's going to be level 13 before we could potentially increase to a 30-foot, but at 30 feet and then 40 feet, level 12, you're going to be level 16 or higher. I feel like you deserve to feel really powerful when you're such high level, but it just means your radius is doing your cap. If you hit your cap, let's say, your cap -3, so like from level, if you're hitting your cap here, you're doing +3. If you're here, it's +5. If you're here, it's +7. If you're here, it's +9. So 9 guaranteed damage plus we go back, you're doing 2d6 or half of 2d6. So like 3.5 to 7 plus 3, 5, whatever. And to everybody within 20, then 30, then 40-foot radius. So I feel like the scaling on this can get crazy feeling. And all the more reason as you increase the radius and potentially can hit a lot more creatures at that point. Once you're hitting a 20-foot radius, that's really nice. Once you're hitting a 30-foot radius, yes, you're going to be level 13. But that could be almost all of the people that you're fighting, depending on what the battlefield looks like. Or like up to half at the very least, if you position yourself right. So they can get pretty wild feeling. And the damage gets, progressively better, guaranteed, and just really nice. But again, you've got to maintain the number of darkness points that you have. However, I just showed you with my example, it's going to be really easy to get 10 to 20 feet turned on like round 1 almost immediately. If you make enough attacks, if you spend your resources like action surge to guarantee, you're getting maybe 3 or 4 at this level right off the bat. And then you've got to do the calculation about the trade-off of maintaining your max darkness and how much extra damage and radius and creatures you're affecting are doing versus spending your darkness features, which brings us back to Weapons of Fear. You can use the mounting darkness around you to fuel grim magic. You gain the following options with which you can spend your darkness points. Death's Grasp, these are all bonus actions. So you might have been thinking, oh, but why haven't you mentioned taking Dual Wielder at level 4? Because with a bonus action, you could maybe even be getting in 5.5e a whole other third attack at level 4, which means you have 4 attacks at level 5, which means you're capping out your darkness points almost for sure by the end of round 1. Again, even starting at level 5. I think in both scenarios, it's really possible to add up really fast if you wanted to, especially starting by level 5 or 4 if you're dual wielding with the bonus action attack. If you don't know what I mean about how that works, I want to make a whole video about drawing, stowing, dual wielding, and how those rules all work. So if you want to see something like that, again, you gotta let me know. I'll prioritize it. I should, because I don't want to have to keep explaining it for that reason too. I could just point to that and say, I really get into the weeds on this very specific thing. If hearing me ramble about this for an hour already wasn't incredibly in the weeds and very specific for you. And sorry if I'm being pedantic. I just want to be clear about what I'm talking about sometimes. Anyway, why not take Dual Wielder? Well, you might really love it for level 4, 5, and 6, but as soon as you hit level 7, I feel like you're going to be wanting to use your bonus action on one of these options every round, because they are all pretty solid. At least one of them per round is going to be probably a better use of your bonus action than squeezing out that one extra attack, which, you know, even if you did have, let's just say, a longsword or rapier or something like that, probably rapier for that extra vex potential advantage, plus that extra attack that you're getting, potentially one extra darkness point, and assuming you have like a +4, we're talking about like average 9.5 damage and a darkness point versus some of the flexibility options you're getting here. Now, it does cost your darkness, which, like I was saying, it's really hard to say. You know, you could be getting a 20-foot radius and affecting multiple creatures for 2d6 plus 3 to 5 extra damage. So because you can take your bonus action before your action, probably what you're hoping is you get a little bit of darkness with your first attacks and try to cap it at the end of your turn, round 1, so that you can start your round 2 by spending your bonus action to lose 2, but then use your regular action to attack and hit to probably, hopefully, hit twice to regain your 2 darkness points. And again, maybe even 3 times in 5.5e. So that you're always ending your turn with your max darkness to make sure that your darkness radius is as big as possible to hit as many creatures as possible to get your con saves and 2d6 plus extra darkness points above 3. Because I feel like it's more optimal to have that radius than it is necessarily to spend these, but if you can constantly get back to max, you got to use your bonus action for these. These are great. Let me talk about them now, finally. You know how it works to spend them. You know the economy of prioritizing. What do we actually do? Death Grasp. You spend 2. You spend 2 for all of them. So, but this one says you make a ranged spell attack within 30 feet. It's essentially, again, uses your charisma. This wants to be a charisma caster so bad. This is the fighter class that wishes it was actually a paladin, even though there is a paladin with a very similar theme in the Ezmerelda's Guide too. So it's also pretty cool, but that's a whole other thing to get into. This is just the fighter that feels like a lot like a paladin, especially the last feature we'll get to in a sec. But essentially, it's a charisma cantrip that deals necrotic damage. It's got a 30-foot range. The damage is 2d8. Now, this doesn't scale, unfortunately, but if I was to redesign this, especially I'm talking about maybe making some tweaks for 5.5, I would just add cantrip damage scaling. So 11th level, you can increase it by another d8, and 17th level by another d8. But I would make it cost 1 additional darkness point when you do it. That way, you're dealing up to 4d8 by the time you're 17th level, which, if we take a look really fast, a little preview, at level 15, there's other features that cost 4 darkness points. So if at 17th level I'm adding 2 darkness points to the cost, and it's now costing 4 darkness points for a 4d8 damage bonus action cantrip. Ravenous Darkness, for example, here does 4d6 for 4 points. I feel like we're keeping on track in terms of what the design has telegraphed to me is a reasonable scaling for number of darkness points being spent. Now you might say, cantrips are free, dude. Why are we spending darkness points on it? Well, technically, even though we kind of feel like we are a little spellcasty with this, I mean, it's got the feeling of spellcasting, but it's not spellcasting. It's darkness channeling. Yeah, it's a cantrip, but it's a bonus action. If I was a sorcerer, I'd be spending 2 of my very precious quickening points, essentially, to also cast a cantrip as a bonus action, in addition to whatever spell I'm quickening. That's kind of how quicken spell works, right? And they don't get that many sorcery points to be doing that all the time. We kind of can, as I've demonstrated multiple times now, pretty easily make darkness points every round. The idea that we are hopefully hitting twice per round, we might not be. Then again, like, if you're not attacking 3 times, you might only be hitting once, right? So spending 2 darkness and then only getting 1 back, you might feel it a little bit over a round or 2. So situational. You got to decide if it's worth it, but I think it's worth it to try to spend your bonus action every round to do one of these things if you can maintain your radius by hitting again. I guess every round you're going to be literally rolling the dice to take the chance that you miss and maybe can't make it up, but that's why you optimize around it if you really want to make sure you're doing your very, very best. But yeah, it's a cantrip, but it also can pull them up to 30 feet towards you, and that makes it amazing. The damage is kind of whatever, actually probably pretty good as a bonus action, and the darkness costs, considering you hopefully you're making it back up. So you got decent damage for a bonus action, and this amazing control, 30-foot pull, no save. That's awesome. I don't think it's too good. I think it's just awesome. Up to is a crazy word to throw in, because it makes a lot of sense. They might be less than 30 feet away from you. So up to makes sense because they might only be 15 feet from you. It pulls them in a straight line towards you. But up to can also imply that you could choose to only pull them 15 more feet towards you. Like if let's say there's a chasm in between the two of you, and if you pull them 30 feet, they'll make it from one side of the chasm to the other. But if you pull them up to, let's say, the 15 feet halfway through, and that's where they would stop and then fall into a chasm, could be pretty cool. I think that's a ask your DM situation just to make sure, but to me that's how that reads, and it makes it just all the better if you can do that, because tactically there could just be a really cool moment where you death grasp someone and yank them towards you and then just stop and let them go. The other feature, Instill Terror, and this might be my favorite. This would probably be like my go-to thing to do if I didn't have a tactical reason to death grasp somebody. This is perfect because it plays into your dreadful nature, which we already talked about, very on theme. But inflicting the frightened condition, which is what it does, for a bonus action, 2 darkness points, and within 30 feet, a wisdom saving throw for your spellcast DC, and on a failure, the creature becomes frightened of you for a minute. It can repeat its save at the end of each turn, but essentially for a bonus action, you can maybe frighten a creature, and the frightened creature gets the frightened condition, which gives disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls while you are within line of sight, and they can't approach or move closer to their source of fear. They can still run away, and unfortunately, it doesn't freeze them in place, which is what you kind of wish it did. Specifically because you want creatures to be close to you to be within your aura. So on second thought, you might never want to do this, because if they can't willingly move closer to you, they're never going to willingly move into the aura of your rising darkness shadow, right? Shadow vortex. So unfortunately, if this was a lockdown frighten, like I think Dissonant Whispers, that and fear both make them run away from you. What am I thinking of? I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking of what people think it does, and I'm making stuff up. Let me know if you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I thought that was a really good condition. I mean, it is still really good. It's great control. So you might just want to do this anyway, but it doesn't quite synergize with putting people into your aura if they're never able to come close to you willingly, of their own will, at least. But finally, we've got the last option, which is the Paladin Smite Obliterate. Spend a bonus action, 2 darkness points, to empower the next weapon you attack you make before the end of your turn, and then on a hit, the empowered attack deals extra necrotic damage and causes the target to suffer a penalty to AC equal to your proficiency bonus until the start of your next turn. So ideally, you do your bonus action again first thing, hit with your first attack, and then you might have 1 or 2, maybe not 3, because again, you're using your bonus action. You're not going to be able to get 4 attacks without your bonus action, even if you have dual wielder in 5.5. So that's where dual wielder really falls off for me. It's great from level 4 to 6, and then level 7, you're going to be wanting to probably use one of these instead. So it starts to be a little meh. Like, I want to use my other cool powers. So, but this AC, so -3 or 4 by level 9, pretty good. Means you're way more likely to hit, which means you're way more likely to make back your darkness. So the synergy is actually really great in that regard. And we deal a smite. 2d4 darkness, plus we can spend additional darkness for an extra d4 for every darkness spent after the 2. Now, a d4 is not exactly Paladin Smite damage worthy. Especially 1d4 per darkness doesn't feel super great and powerful. Plus, the thing is, compared to what you could be doing just passively with your Rising Darkness radius, it doesn't really make sense to spend extra darkness especially for a d4 damage when, let's say you've got at level 7 still, just when you get this, your proficiency is still +3, you can have up to 6 darkness. Let's say you get to your cap at the end of round 1. Let's say you get to your 6 darkness cap at the end of round 1. You've got a 20-foot radius Rising Darkness Vortex Shadow that's doing 2d6 plus 3 damage. So you're looking at, even if they succeed and they take half of the 2d6, we're talking 6.6 to 10 average damage every round, guaranteed to every enemy within a 20-foot radius. So if I'm doing 10 damage within a 20-foot radius, why the heck would I deal an extra d4 and maybe lose one of my darkness points and reduce my radius back down to 10 feet and maybe do 10 less damage to half as many people? 10 less damage is a lot more than a d4. So I think this is a little bit of a case of this is just so not good enough compared to your enhanced Rising Darkness with Reaching Darkness and the scaling on Rising Darkness with the additional Reaching Radius. Again, feeling like it's maybe just too good that it becomes your whole thing. I mean, it's so cool and I really want to play it, but it's feeling a little broken come level 7, and in particular something like this dealing an extra d4 just can't keep up. So back again, harping on especially 5.5, you can maybe get one more attack, which means one more darkness point per round versus a 2014's 5e design philosophy. I'm starting to think maybe I was right to think that we should bump up all of the costs by 1. So instead of having 3 or more darkness to get your aura started, you'd have to have 4. And instead of +1 damage above 3, it'd be +1 damage for everyone above 4, which wouldn't exist yet? I don't know. But certainly by level 7, think about it. If you're spending 3 darkness for all of these abilities, you're way more likely to drop from your max at like 6 or 8 down to 3 or 5. And then in either case, you have to hopefully hit at least once out of potentially 2 or 3 attacks. That would still get you, if you get to max, let's say, still get you back to 10 or 20 feet, respectively, with your aura, which is doing much better damage. But I don't know, it's a balancing act. Like I said, I'm vibesing this out and just feeling like it's really powerful. But I do think there's something to this here in terms of balance, especially in the 5.5e optimization context. If you're not optimizing to get that 3rd attack, you can only gain back 2, then 2 feels a lot more reasonable for all these things, because then you're constantly going back and maybe spending but regaining, and again, only if you hit with both attacks per round. So it's not guaranteed. Maybe I would just bump up Rising Darkness from 3 to 4 and then leave the rest. I'm not sure. I haven't decided. Help me figure it out if you're so inclined. The problem is if I do that, like at lower levels, at level 3, it starts to feel bad because then you're almost for sure spending at least 2 rounds before you can ever turn it even on. And the extra damage at those lower levels is kind of like whatever. The 10-foot radius is kind of like whatever. But as soon as you hit level 7, we're doing probably twice as much damage because the d6 goes up, plus her proficiency cap goes up, and you're getting +1 for every point above. And yeah, all that to say, I don't think d4 is good enough. I think this should be at least d6s, like almost everything else is d6s. The 2d8 scales about right at level 7 for what you could potentially get out of a dual wielder feat bonus action attack. So that seems fine. But yeah, I really do love all the options we get here. I think they're all really cool, thematic, and really powerful control options, plus Obliterate, which I think you would not use if it meant choosing between this and making sure your Reaching Darkness aura is as big as it possibly could be. But situationally, and especially for near the end of combat, you might be inclined to just blow all of your darkness points because you know you're not going to be able to keep them into the next combat anyway. You're always going to be starting back at 0. Perfect way to end an encounter is to blow all your darkness and take somebody out, if it would make a difference. That's why I don't think the D4 is good enough, because trying to end a fight with a little bit of Nova at the end would be cool, but not for a D4. In fact, I really thought instead of the D6s, the Rising Darkness feature really maybe would scale a little better if they were D4s instead of D6s. And that might be the solution to all of this, is just nerf this a little bit so it's not so overwhelmingly the best possible thing you could do once you pass level 5, and especially past level 7. Like, it'll still be doing good, consistent damage, but it won't be quite so much. I guess we're talking about, like, what, 2 average damage or 1 average damage at lower levels per creature per turn. So it's not a totally unreasonable difference in power. At the end of the day, I feel like you just really have to play it to see how it feels, especially just how quickly and how worth it feels. I think at lower levels it suffers, but at higher levels, once you have more attacks and it's so easy to potentially hit to get the Vortex going, that it makes sense to have ways to spend as well. And so there's that push-pull, like, how many rounds does it take to get up? How many extra points are you spending? Like, if you want to spend points in round 1 to do these bonus actions, you've got to attack maybe only twice, maybe only get 2 points, maybe not even turn your aura on and then spend them immediately, then you have 0 again. So I've got to come off of this. Those are just some of my ideas about how to balance things. I think my conclusion is nerf Rising Darkness from a D6 to a D4 and buff Obliterate from a D4 to a D6. That way it at least feels like it's doing a little bit of something and I might want to use it, not just at the very end of a combat. The only other thing I have to mention about Obliterate 2 is another small fix, I think. A potential feel bad is you spend 2 darkness to empower the next weapon attack you make, and then on a hit. So that implies that you have to spend your bonus action, you charge up your blade and then the next attack you make misses. You only get anything else if you hit with the next attack. So potential feel bad moment, I think should and could be easily fixed by just clarifying the language to say before the end of your next turn, if you hit or on your first hit after using this bonus action to empower your weapon, or lean hard into the paladin and just copy paste the language as a bonus action, which you take immediately after hitting a target with a melee weapon or unarmed strike. You can spend 2 or more darkness to empower your strike to blah blah blah, as is the 5.5e modern design for a bonus action smite. And because it's not a spell, you could even multi-class barbarian. So pretty cool. I like it. But yeah, I would definitely make that fix just to make sure that it's not a save or suck, feel bad, miss the hit situation. Oh, and side tangent, going back a little bit, since I mentioned unarmed strike, as that was a big change too, is allowing smiting with unarmed strikes. This also says, with the Rising Darkness and such, you only gain darkness points when you hit with a weapon attack. Now, I feel like in the modern zeitgeist of the game, we would change this to allow unarmed strikes as well. However, I hear you. What about multi-classing Monk? They can get more unarmed strikes thanks to the Flurry of Blows. It's the same problem I've been harping on about this whole video, about being able to get more attacks, and the more attacks that you get per round, the faster you can get your Rising Darkness Vortex up. So doesn't that break things? Doesn't that make a problem, make it easier, change the balance of things around? I would say yes, but that's using their bonus action, which we already discussed becomes high in demand later on, and the amount of multi-classing you would have to do between the two classes to really make it worth it. Like Monk's Flurry of Blows, they only get 2 attacks. Plus they have to spend a focus point on it, so that's a resource on the Monk side they have to split. And then they don't get 3 attacks with their Flurry of Blows for unarmed strikes until they're like level 10. So you're really going to go 10 levels just to super optimize me allowing unarmed strikes instead of just weapon attacks here? I don't think so. I think it's fine. That's my opinion. I think it's worth more to open up the fun of allowing unarmed strikes to be a thing. If you want to be a punching, I was going to say punching paladin, but it's a fighter who wishes they were a paladin. But if you want to be a punching fighter and lean into that because that's what you think of as cool, and even if you want to multi-class with Monk and try to optimize it, you're going to spend 3 levels to get there. You know, if you really want to be smart, you're taking this to level 5 or level 7 probably before you even want to consider multi-classing. Or you started Monk and you left them at 3, and then you're not getting extra attack until you're level 8. Again, in a vacuum, it all sounds like it should be really good, but in reality, that's so many levels. So honestly, I'm not worried about it. I would change this to allow unarmed strikes as well. And while we're here, I got to address my last problem with this, because it says whenever you hit a creature with a weapon attack. That's whenever. No other stipulation. Unfortunately, this creates what you call the bag of rats problem, meaning because it lasts for up to a minute, if you haven't dealt damage to a hostile creature, this doesn't specify anything up here about a hostile creature. It just says a creature, which means you could have a bag full of rats and just punch rats before you go into combat to max out your darkness points and then rush in for the start of combat. And I feel like that sort of breaks the cycle of what this class tries to do by making them only last a minute and having to restart and sort of build them up into getting your swirling darkness vortex going and having darkness points available by hitting creatures. So another quick fix that I would definitely make is whenever you hit a hostile creature with a weapon attack or unarmed strike in combat, ... And I think that would solve the bag of rats problem. Just like putting things into context with other martial level 3 powers, the Fey Wanderer Ranger once per turn deals an extra d4 psychic damage, and that only scales to 1d6 when they get to level 11. Now, some people might say that the damage scaling on the Ranger sucks, so that's fair, but I think the fact that we could deal a d6 damage plus more to multiple creatures per turn by maybe round 2, let's say. I don't know, it just feels a little off in terms of maybe not what should be, but compared to what is. And that's why I'm hesitant to call this a little overpowered and something I'm compelled to nerf to make feel a little bit more fair. Like I might say change it to a d4 and then, I don't know, even instead of 7th level, make it like 11th level, like the Ranger. Let them keep the 18th level upgrade because that's missing on the Ranger, to be honest. They should scale again, in my opinion. And probably scale more than just a d6 to like a d8 damage die too. I mean, come on. When you're level 11, when you're level 18, you should be doing a little bit more than a d6 extra damage. And again, this is to one target. We are talking d4s if we nerf it, plus still damage. We're talking maybe +5 or +8 even at higher levels, guaranteed within 20, 30, 40 feet easily by round 2, probably, if we're optimized in 5.5 at least. So yeah, it's all about the scaling and the fact that it can apply to multiple creatures. Maybe you're one of those people who thinks martials need a boost anyway and they should be doing comparable numbers to spellcasting, and maybe I'm offside about the numbers. But just on paper and thinking about it, it just feels so good. at least the scaling with the radius and the damage amounts, because they synergize too. The more darkness points you have, the bigger your radius is, and the more additional damage you're guaranteeing you're doing to all of those creatures. And that just brings me back to thinking, if everything was a little bit more expensive, there'd be a lot more push and pull between how many darkness points are you spending every round versus how many you're getting back by hitting, versus how many are you accumulating, how quickly, and keeping in reserve to increase your darkness radius. Okay, I think I've said way more than enough about that. I probably rambled for like an hour about the scaling and the different ideas I have to nerf it and balance that. But we are finally talking about our level 10 feature, believe it or not. And I feel like this really synergizes with the fighter class, base class, Indomitable feature. This is Inexorable. It says the darkness grants you unnatural resilience in the face of danger. By the darkness, I think we mean your shadow vortex or something like that, or just darkness in general, or the darkness points that you get. When you take damage, you can use your reaction and spend all of your darkness points, absorbing it back into your body. You roll a d6 for every darkness you spend. You then gain temporary hit points equal to the result plus your fighter level, including against the triggering damage. So essentially, you use your reaction, and instead of putting up shield, you suck all your darkness in, and you empower yourself with temporary hit points to try to cushion the blow, I guess. At the end of your next turn, you'll lose any remaining temporary hit points, but you regain hit points equal to those temporary hit points that you would be losing at the end of your next turn. So pretty good. I don't know if you really need to lose the temporary hit points, but having them convert into actual healing, assuming you have taken damage, could be really good. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I almost want to buff it. I think if you just don't lose your temporary hit points at all, and you just gain those temporary hit points. I know in 5.5e especially, there's so many ways to gain temporary hit points. Maybe you don't want to keep them hanging around that much, and the healing conversion is better in that case, where somebody else might be giving you temporary hit points regularly or some other way. But I don't know, that's dependent. I actually don't think this overall ability is much better than any other fighter level 10 ability, but as I've been over ad nauseum, the earlier features are like so good compared to other fighters too that I feel like it balances out fine. I'm not too worried about it. This is very thematically doing exactly what it's meaning to be doing. And honestly, my only problem with it is I don't know when I would ever actually want to use this unless I didn't have that much darkness left to begin with, or I've spent it all, or it's still really early in the round and I think I'm getting it back or building it up quick enough. Or I suppose if you're really desperate, like I don't think you're using this if you have like 8 darkness to roll that much healing conversion potentially. I don't know how much damage you're getting hit by, but it better be a lot, especially when you consider the cost of having to spend probably 2 or 3 rounds rebuilding that much darkness to get your radius back up, and then how good your radius damage would be doing passively otherwise. Like, you need to be saving yourself from probably going down when you use this ability. And then obviously you'd have to be pretty badly hurt by then, so then the temporary points converting to real health is actually great. So while this feels really situational and like not something you would ever really want to actively be doing with your darkness, you definitely want to keep it and have it up as much as possible. In a pinch, this is possibly an amazing save to keep you in the fight. You might drop your shadow and just be doing your regular attacks while you build it back up, and maybe you won't be able to use your bonus actions on additional things, in which case falling back on something like dual wielding might not be so bad. You get that 1 extra attack out every turn, and you build up your darkness again faster. So I haven't written dual wielding off the table just yet, just because it becomes less relevant after level 7. You might still end up using it. especially if you're spending it more often and not necessarily able to afford to use one of your spending darkness options every round. Maybe that extra attack with the bonus action becomes really clutch because it helps you build it back up faster to spend it again and then not need it, ironically. But yeah, Inexorable, I think, is a great feature. I don't really think I would change it in any way. I think it's really cool. And relatively quickly, we're already moving on to the next feature, Improved Weapons of Fear. So just like the Weapons of Fear at level 7, at level 15, we get some options to spend our darkness points on, and they're kind of like spell effects or control powerful effects, but they cost a little more. These all cost 4 darkness points instead of 2, but you got to keep in mind, we're level 15 by the time these come online. Level 15, you've got a +5 proficiency bonus, which means you have 10 max darkness points, and you're only 1 level away from your max proficiency bonus and 12 darkness points. So at your cap, you're now fighter 15, which means you're past level 11, so you got 3 attacks per 1 attack action, all the more attacks to get back your darkness points built up faster. Plus, studied attacks is unlocked at level 13, so if you miss an attack roll, you have an advantage on your next attack roll before the end of your next turn. So you got advantage all like crazy, which means you're more likely to hit, which means you're more likely to get your darkness points up faster. So round 1, you're maybe hitting, let's say, 2 out of 3 or 4 or even 5 attacks if you're using your bonus action with dual wielding. Nick, light, even 3. 3 gets your 10 feet up. Round 2, 6 to 8, 20 feet up. Round 3 or 4, probably you've got enough darkness, even if you're spending some along the way, maybe. Yeah, and this is where the balance gets a little expensive, and I reconsider how long it takes to get there. I keep going back to this. How long it takes to get there versus how much damage and potential it does once you do get there, and then how much you're spending all the time in order to do other things. Like, these are all really great uses of your bonus action. They do great control things and cool stuff. So, and costing 4 darkness, that's probably at least a round worth of attacks or more to regain. Never mind gain in the first place, to be able to do round 2 or 3 at best. And we're level 15. So as good as some of this stuff feels or seems on paper, we're level 15. We should be able to be doing some pretty wild stuff, and comparing our multiple attacks, damage output, and other things that we can do versus the control and spell casting stuff, marshals versus casters, I don't know. Compared to other marshals, they can do a lot of cool stuff now too, so I become so much more tolerant and less forgiving of certain things after a certain high level, because 1, you're probably not even going to play it. Let's be honest, you're probably not playing that high level very often, and when you do, you want to feel like you've earned it and doing really awesome, cool things and lots of damage, and being able to turn on your shadow super fast and effectively. Keep in mind the scaling on the last thing, like, it's so easy to forget. Action surging or second winding gains darkness equal to proficiency bonus, which is scaling. So at level 15 and then 16, we're getting, if I action surge round 1, not only am I getting 3 attacks from my extra attack, plus an action surge for 5 or 6 darkness, plus another 3 attacks from extra attack with the action surge again. So we're doing 6 attacks plus 6 already. We could be, in theory, if we hit with just every attack, not even counting a 4th or 5th attack from dual wielding or Nick shenanigans, if we hit all 12 hits, that we can't, not 12, if we hit all 6 hits we can do with spending our action surge on it and getting those darkness points automatically, we hit our cap of 12 at level 16 round 1. So spending 4 darkness points to go from 40 feet down to 20 feet doesn't make a lot of sense unless it's round 2 and you do that at the beginning of your turn and then make 4 more attacks and maybe get all the way back up if you're lucky, maybe only get to 30 feet. Maintaining 40 feet is probably going to be a challenge, at least the push and pull of it. So 4 darkness points actually feels good. at this point, at this level. So my idea to add an extra point to account for the amount of advantage and squeezing out extra nick attacks or cleave that 5e design wouldn't have accounted for starts to feel a little less super relevant. You kind of just want people to get the thing. So I guess I'll put it to bed for now. I've said more than enough on that. Let's talk about what the actual abilities do. The first one's Baneshadow. So spend your bonus action, your 4 darkness points, until the end of your next turn. So essentially 2 turns worth when you think about it. Because probably, again, all of these things, you're spending your darkness. You're hopefully at your cap when you start your turn by having a good turn before. So by, come round 2, you're hoping you're pretty much at max. You're spending these points right away with your bonus action, then doing your regular action attacks to regain and top back up to your maximum. And that just means when it says until the end of your next turn, you've got probably your entire turn plus your entire next turn to benefit from it, which makes it feel all the easier to regain your darkness points to then spend them again, because even if you miss half of your attacks and you're making 3 attacks a round or more, or maybe, like I said, if you're optimizing in 5.5, you're making 4 attacks a round, you hit twice one round, you hit twice another round, you got your 4 back that you spent, but it took 2 rounds. So the fact that it lasts 2 rounds makes it pretty good. You don't feel bad like you're super wasting it, even though it only ends until the end of your next turn. But I keep doing that. I keep sidetracking about the mechanics. The feature says, until the end of your next turn, whenever a creature within the area of your Rising Darkness, that's your shadow radius, does an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, they subtract a d6 from the roll. Now, it's called Baneshadow. Bane, the first level spell, is a d4, but here we get a d6. I'm okay with it. We're level 15. Bane applies to 3 creatures. It's a concentration level 1 spell. We're a level 15, although we're a fighter. How many creatures are we going to be affecting with this? Well, I'm probably not spending 4 darkness points if that's going to reduce my radius. So I'm probably not spending it. I'm at level 15. I probably have 10 darkness points at max, right? Maybe after round 1, if I'm lucky and I action surged, I'm going to have 10 at the end of round 1. I got my 30-foot radius. I know I'm getting all my extra damage to all those people. Round 2, I spend 4. I'm down to 6, down to a 20-foot radius. I'm not spending my darkness points if I only have 4, or I would go down to a 20-foot or even a 10-foot, or gosh forbid, turning it off altogether. I'm not going to spend my points unless I already have near the max. It just doesn't make sense. Like, why would I turn off my aura altogether when it affects creatures within my aura? I need my aura to be as big as possible. So I'm assuming I'm using this and I am affecting a 20-foot radius or even a 30-foot radius if I'm lucky to get my attacks in after to get back to maximum. So, and it's not concentration or anything. All that to say, I think this is really strong. A D6 at level 15 makes more sense than just a D4, but it can apply to so many more creatures, no concentration. I know I'm comparing the level 15 feature to a level 1 spell, but it is Baneshadow. It's in the name, it called for it. But every creature within a 20 to 30 foot radius is pretty awesome. And definitely something worth spending your 4 darkness on for the control it gives you. The biggest problem with this is just the wording. It says whenever a creature within the area of your Rising Darkness feature. So who are creatures within the area of our Rising Darkness feature? It says it manifests around you as a 10-foot radius. So I think my idea to fix this and call it an emanation would actually make it worse for us. Yeah, an emanation is an area effect that extends from a creature. So in theory, like with the paladin, your emanations of your auras include you. Oh, but it says an emanation's origin, creature or object, isn't included in the area of effect unless its creator decides otherwise. So paladins choose to include themselves in their aura emanations. You could choose or choose not to include yourself if we called it an emanation, in which case the around you language still applies. The correct design choice in this case applies. But I was afraid it was a close call there, that we might have included ourselves by accident in the area of our Shadow Bane. But it says around you, and even if we updated it to 5.5e, just call it an emanation because it's simpler, you can still not include yourself in it. However, this doesn't say anything about whether a creature has to be hostile or not. So that means any creature, which includes your allies, unfortunately. So it's up to you, and then, just like sometimes you have to watch out and consider who you're fireballing and who's going to get caught in it. This is a feature where you really have to consider, is it worth potentially baning my allies if they are within what is hopefully a 20 or 30 foot radius from you? Because you're using this when you hopefully have a lot of darkness built up and then are hoping to regain it. So you might have to be careful about boosting your aura. Maybe it's because it's until the end of your next turn, you might spend it and have a 20 or 30 foot aura. By the end of your next turn, get it up to a 40 foot aura if you're level 16. Suddenly a 40 foot aura, you're catching your allies, and you can't turn this off until the end of your next turn. I guess because it's until the end of your next turn, ending up with a 40 foot aura at the end of the next turn doesn't really make sense or matter. So maybe I overthought it a little bit, but it still might suck a little to include your allies. You could change this to say hostile creature and just exclude your allies, and that might just make it feel better and a little bit more easy to use and more just slicker, smoother for a level 15 expenditure. Like, we're going to talk about the darkness spell itself shortly from now, but it's kind of like that all the time with dim light if you're getting your aura. So this already is a subclass in general that you're going to have to watch your areas of effect and how that might impact your allies. They might love it. They might, love dim light and be able to take advantage of it with some of their features somehow. But I don't know. I think that was maybe not even a thing anymore. Like, I think I'm thinking of the Wood Elf feature from 5e that doesn't exist anymore in 5.5. So you tell me if you can think of a way to use dim light radius to your advantage. But more than likely, on the other hand, dim light doesn't do too much. It affects your ability to make perception checks, and that's about it, usually. But you got to consider you might be somehow interfering with your allies already. So to have your party hate you more by almost unintentionally just aura running through them and making them have worse saves and ability checks, like, a very punishing problem to have. I would, for the sake of fun and play at the table, for me bringing this to the table, wanting to use it with other people around, it's technically a buff, but I think it's a, for the good of the game, kind of buff to say hostile creatures within the area and take that party effect off of your allies, and overall just makes it a lot better. Feel a lot better. Okay, finally moving on, the next feature we get is Ravenous Darkness. And this one I think is maybe the best one. And finally, totally synergizes with what we're going for in terms of wanting creatures to be within our darkness aura. You spend a bonus action and the 4 darkness points. Shadows coalesce around one creature that you can see within your Rising Darkness aura, which again can change. The target makes a strength saving throw, spell save DC, and on a fail takes 46 necrotic damage and becomes restrained for 1 minute. Restrained is incredible. It makes their speed 0, so now they can't run away and run out of your aura. They have disadvantage on their attack rolls, and you have advantage on attack rolls against them, and they also have disadvantage on dex saves. They or another creature that can touch them has to spend their whole action for a strength check against your spell save DC. I'm not sure which strength check, just a flat strength check, or if we would allow athletics. Might be a DM's call to say if it should include athletics skill proficiencies or just a flat strength modifier. Honestly, I think I would just copy the grappling rules and say they can make a strength or dexterity check if we're going to make them do a check of some kind. And it says here against your spell save DC. I know exactly what they mean because it's clear charisma is our spell casting modifier in terms of all of our abilities, but we never call it a spell casting modifier technically. It's not a spell save DC. We technically never define this. So we could say, again, just the same DC that we spelled it out here, or we could try to fix it some other way. But we all know what you mean, but it's technically never been defined properly, so we have to just make the assumption. So that could be fixed in several ways. But anyway, restrained essentially is a fantastic condition. It's one creature, but they have to use their action. We lock them down. The only questions I have about this is the fact that because we're spending darkness to target the creature, and they have to be within the Rising Darkness feature to be targeted, I guess what comes first? The targeting them and losing our radius by spending points? Like we could have 12 points at level 16 and have a 40-foot radius vortex going, spend 4 points, go all the way down to 20 feet, and suddenly they're not within our radius anymore and therefore can't be targeted. I would have to assume the intention is the creature's still in range after having spent your 4 darkness points in order to essentially cast the Ravenous Darkness effect. The fact that they should be in the darkness to do it. So the restrained is the main thing here. Restrained is awesome. It's 4 darkness for one creature, but it's really good. Plus it does damage. If they succeed, they take half damage and aren't restrained. So it's not save or suck. You still get something out of it. 46 necrotic damage, like I mentioned way back in the video about comparing damage amounts. 46 is like not a lot of damage at 15th level in particular, but consider it's a bonus action still. If I was just attacking with my bonus action, I might be doing a d8 plus 5 at this level. So this is actually still more damage, I think, on average than a dual wield attack with a bonus action. And it does so much more with the restraint. So I think that Ravenous Darkness is the new Instill Terror. It's like everything Instill Terror wishes it was. And the fact that they have to waste a whole action to get out of it makes it incredible. No concentration, nothing. It just captures them if they fail the initial save. Now, at first they make a strength saving throw, and then they make a strength check. Like I said, I think I would probably copy the grappling rules and allow strength, athletics, or dexterity acrobatics to escape, or just call it a strength saving throw against your spell save DC. Or again, not your spell save DC, we're going to fix that, but yeah, it depends on how generous you're being. Obviously, the strength save initially is one thing, and then spending their own action to get out of it is maybe the action makes the balance of it being a strength check versus a save. I mean, the only way your strength check is better than your save, because you might have proficiency in saving throws, but not in any skill to strength check out of. So it could be worse in theory, but that's why I think allowing a skill like athletics or acrobatics like a grapple to escape, I don't know, might make more sense. For spending your action, if you have a skill, you might just be better at your skill than your save, especially if we allow acrobatics. That's another one where, I don't know, maybe it's fine and I'm just overthinking it. Let's just move on to Void Vortex. As a bonus action, 4 darkness points, the area of your Rising Darkness feature, which is probably changing from a 30-foot at max or 40-foot if you're level 16 at max, down to a 20-foot or 10-foot even. No, down to a 20-foot. Never mind. So we're losing 10 feet on it just to cast it, I guess, and then hopefully making attacks to regain it. But that area of your Rising Darkness feature changes from being just dim light to now being magical darkness. So magical darkness means that your warlocks with Devil's Sight will be able to see through it. You'll be able to see through it thanks to your level 7 boon, which I already talked about earlier. I think you should just give it to them at level 3 when the warlock gets it. That way everybody can play together with the warlock's darkness. right away. And then, all right, let me finish reading it and then I'll get to my gripe. Typical stuff, a creature with dark vision can't see through it because it's magical darkness, and non-magical light, as well as light created by a 5th level spell or lower, can't illuminate the area. The darkness spell, I think it's level 2 or lower, at least in 5.5. So 5th or lower, that means like Sunbeam and stuff. Sunbeam's level 6, so that would work, but anything less can't penetrate, which feels about right for a level 15 feature. But that's my big gripe about this is a level 15 feature we're not getting until now. We're able to cast essentially darkness until the end of our next turn, which I already sort of talked about. We're probably using these bonus actions at the beginning of our turn, so we're effectively getting concentration-free darkness spell for 2 turns. Darkness is usually only 15 foot, so we're getting a little bit bigger with our radius, which is probably more than 10 by the end of our turn, and maybe more than 20 even. So it's bigger, so that's cool, but it costs us 4 darkness points. And what is it doing for us? Like, these other abilities give some really cool control, like doing the Bane or restraining a creature. But for 4 darkness points, we are essentially getting a sort of bigger darkness spell, which again can play badly with our allies and even unintentionally, because the size of our rising darkness radius is potentially shifting between our turns if we're spending the darkness. So it could be growing or going away or getting in the way when we don't necessarily want it to for our allies. And what does it give us? Well, darkness, magical darkness, if they can't see through it, it's heavily obscured, which means everybody's going to have disadvantage on their attack rolls against you because you're in the middle of it. And effectively, what is that going to do for you? It means you're probably going to have advantage on all of your attacks against the creatures that you're in melee with, and they're all going to have disadvantage on their attacks, or they're going to not see anything and try to run away and not know where to go or what's going on. So it's pretty much just darkness, which spellcasters have been able to do since level 3. Eldritch Knights since level 7 when they get 2nd level spells. So what the heck are we doing spending 4 darkness points for advantage, essentially, and possibly detrimenting the rest of our party? Okay, and disadvantage against you. But we're just getting darkness, which we can see through, which warlocks have been doing since level 3, and this is 4 points, and it's a level 15 feature. I feel like we needed to have 3 abilities at level 15 because we got 3 abilities at level 7, but I'm saying this sucks. Void Vortex should have been the 4th level 7 weapon of fear, and it should have cost 2 darkness points to cast darkness, and if you want to cut it in half to make it make more sense, as a level 7 ability and only costing 2 darkness, cut the effect in half by changing it from until the end of your next turn to until the start of your next turn. That effectively, if you cast this at the beginning of your turn, or even if you cast it at the end of your turn strategically to have all your enemies have disadvantage against you wherever you end up, or maybe there's a reason that you cast everything in real darkness and make it not see-throughable, you're hiding the MacGuffin in there, whatever you're doing. If you cast this, like I said, use your bonus action at the beginning of your turn, take advantage of it. But yeah, you use it on 1 turn, you've got it until the start of your next turn, which means you get all the benefits of everything, but then you've only spent 2 darkness on it, and it's just a concentration-free limited darkness spell, which other people don't have to spend resources on to maintain concentration round over round. They just have to not lose concentration. It's only a level 2 spell slot. And the thing is, even in the design as is, before I'm coming in saying, oh, I would change this or whatever, all the way back at Dreadsight, we reach level 7 and we can see through magical darkness. But we can't ever on our own cast magical darkness until level 15. That doesn't feel right. 100% we should have got that at level 7 at the same time at the very least to see through magical darkness and gain some kind of ability to cast magical darkness ourselves, not relying on a sorcerer, wizard, or warlock, or somebody else in the party to be casting the darkness that we want to be seeing through or using for our tactics or whatever. I've been saying they should have got the Devil's Sight at level 3 so they can play in the warlock's darkness. And I think it's perfectly fair to wait till level 7 to be able to cast it yourself. If you want to give them both of those at the same time at level 7, fine. I still think they should get to see through the darkness by level 3, just in case there is somebody else in the party who is casting darkness, and we're the darkness guy, we're the darkness dude. Our whole vibe is edgelord shrouded by shadows and darkness, like the darkest dude there ever was, and we can't see through darkness. Give it to us at level 3. Let us play with the darkness if somebody else has it. Synergizes with good team play and doesn't create a barrier to play, which is kind of what I was saying about you might not want to do it because you could be messing other people up. That is always the double-edged sword of using darkness, magical darkness like that. So yeah, I say give them the ability at level 3. Don't wait till level 7, but give the darkness spell power, Void Vortex, at level 7, not level 15. It's way too late to be doing anything with it, and it doesn't make any sense when we've been able to see through darkness since, at least level 7 in the original design. So I think this was a mistake. It was probably just trying to balance out number of features, but come on, it really should have been all the way back at level 7. I'm okay, change it to 2 darkness. 4 is way too much for what it gives you. And then I might actually use it at level 7. Even if I nerf it to then say start of your next turn to cut it in half, essentially. I think it still makes way more sense. Even if we have a larger radius than like the normal 15 feet. You got to consider too, even if I give it to you at level 7, you don't have that much darkness at level 7, right? Level 7, you still only have 6 darkness max. You have to be level 9 before you get to 8, and level 13 still before you get to 10 max. So, it can be easy to forget when you're looking at the chart that like 6 to 8, 9 to 11, that's the number of darkness points you need to have built up, not your level. You actually can't get a 30-foot radius until you're at least level 13. So having 5 more feet of darkness than the regular concentration spell and only 4 around for 2 darkness points, even that feels almost too weak just for darkness, considering what it is and kind of the overall benefit of it. I don't know. Darkness play can actually be really powerful, so maybe I'm underselling it. If you can see through it and you have it, it's actually could be a really powerful tool. So I'm a little on the fence. I think nerfing, cut in the points in half to spend on it, give it to you at half as far level progression. Let the scaling of the natural darkness accumulation radius, let it do its own thing. It already self-balances because it's actually a really good design that way. And yeah, that's about it. That's Void Vortex. It should be a level 7 ability and costs 2 darkness. On the fence a little bit about letting it last till the end of next turn instead of just the start of your next turn, but it only costs 2. Spend it again next turn. It's a little bit more expensive as a bonus action, but probably a pretty fair trade-off. I think maybe even just let it go until the end of your next turn. That way the language is all the same, even if it's comparatively different from the later abilities if you get it earlier. But like pretty much everything in this subclass says end of, so even my pitch for a fix on the Rising Darkness turns, instead of starting their turn, make it the end of your turn. That way everything's end of turn. I don't know. Again, let me know your thoughts. I'm not 100% sold, but I think I'm leaning towards the straight cut in half the start of turn. But finally, we've got Evernight, the final feature at level 18. Shadow is more precious to you than blood. It sustains you, even when your body should falter. While you have at least 1 darkness point, having 0 hit points doesn't knock you unconscious. This is incredible. This is better than all of the barbarian features and whatever other stuff lets you keep going after you've quote unquote gone down. In fact, I think this is a little more 5e design than 5.5 because they sort of changed some of that stuff around to just get you like half hit points back and stuff, if I recall correctly. So take that as you will, but this is crazy. I mean, I know it's kind of like the subclass capstone, so it's supposed to be really awesome, but this is maybe a little too offside from some other stuff that you can get, because it says you still make death saves and you suffer the normal effects of taking damage while at 0 hit points. So like, I think what they're trying to say is hitting you can crit for 2 death saves. Like, you still take death saves. All right, let's double check. Dropping to 0 hit points either dies outright or falls unconscious. So you don't get knocked unconscious. It doesn't say you can't die outright if you take enough damage. Massive damage, when it reduces you to 0 hit points and there's still damage to be done, the remainder meets or exceeds their max HP, they die instantly. So that's still on the table. Your max HP being reduced to 0 also could kill you instantly. And then otherwise, you fall unconscious. The ability says you don't fall unconscious. So what happens? You essentially are immune to the unconscious condition in terms of reaching 0 hit points at that moment. But you got to make out death saves. Other than making death saves, though, because you avoid unconscious, you avoid a lot of the negative effects like being incapacitated and prone, speed 0, attack rolls having advantage, and auto crits. Any attack that hits you is a critical hit if the attacker's within 5 feet of you. You can become stable. You get to 0 hit points, but you stop making death saving throws. And otherwise, on the 3rd failure, you die. Damage at 0 hit points. If you take any damage while at 0 hit points, you suffer a death saving throw. So only if it's a critical hit do you suffer 2. And then the same thing for excessive damage exceeding your max HP. And a stable creature, don't make more death saving throws. Again, you're immune to an unconscious condition. But if you take more damage, you stop being stable and start making death saving throws again. None of this says anything about clearing your death saves once you hit stable. Oh, here it is. I'm blind. The number of both resets to 0 when you regain any HP or become stable. So that's a thing. But that's the regular rules. So basically, every time you get hit with an attack, you gain a failed death save. If you get hit with a crit, you get 2 failed death saves. But what does that mean? You suffer the normal effects while taking damage at 0 hit points. It's pretty much just you don't have the detriments of the unconscious condition, which means auto crits and advantage against you. You just do death saves. However, if you would die due to failing death saves, you still don't die until your darkness is reduced to 0. And then you die only then if you still have 0 hit points. So what does this mean? At least 1 darkness. It's clear to me that unless this is round 1 and you haven't got any darkness yet, there's no way by 18th level, any reason you should ever even risk spending that last darkness point. Always keep at least 1. Because this Evernight ability is outstanding. Probably too good. But it's a capstone, so feeling really awesome and incredible is its job. But it's so easy. Just keep that 1 darkness point. There's no reason to spend it. Nothing would make you spend it. The only way you could spend it or lose it is if you wait the 1 minute it takes to, after combat, to have them all disappear. Or if you fall unconscious, which you're not going to do by ever getting knocked out from 0 hit points. You're basically immune to becoming unconscious while you have 1 darkness, so that's not going to happen. Pretty much the only other way you're going to become unconscious and lose your darkness is by some other effect, like the sleep spell. So there are still ways around it. This isn't like an auto immortality, basically. There are still ways around it. You can still become unconscious in other ways, but they would have to knock you to 0 HP, not have you heal. You still have 1 darkness, and then they do something else that knocks you unconscious, and then you just auto die, or just start making death saves because you would lose all your darkness. And then you don't die until your darkness is reduced to 0. Just means that even after the fight, you've basically got a free 1 minute to get at least a little bit of healing to put you back to at least 1 HP, and then you don't die. So pretty awesome. Play an elf, so you can't be magically put to sleep, and you're probably immortal, unless they've got some other thing to do. Let me know if you can think of any other abilities or effects that make people fall unconscious. And that would work on an elf too. But hear me out. I know this is the capstone and it's supposed to be awesome, but it just feels so good and perfect, and like you just can never be taken down, and just kind of so easy to do and maintain that I think you got to add a caveat. My fix, my idea, if you start your turn or if you end your turn and you still have 0 hit points, you lose 1 darkness point each round. Every time, I'm going to say, I kind of advocated before that everything in this subclass is at the end of your turn. And I think here's the thing. If you want to risk it and you want to spend your last 4 or 2 or whatever, all of your darkness points on something like Inexorable or any of your abilities, you want to spend those points. You want to spend your last darkness point that's keeping you alive, that last one, and just assume that you're going to take the rest of your turn and make attacks and hit at least once to get 1 back, but you somehow miss all of your attacks and you get 0 back and you end your turn with 0. I think that's on you. That was a risk you were willing to take. So I think it's fair to say if you end your turn with 0 darkness and you still have 0 hit points, obviously you're going to die. If you end your turn and you don't even have 1, that's a mistake. You're going to -1 and then be at 0. And then you auto die. So you kind of need 2. So I guess what I'm saying is, even if you want to spend all of your points and leave 1 left available, you got to make sure that there's like there's a cost, a ticking counter to staying at 0 hit points round after round. Because otherwise you hit 0 hit points and then you're just immortal unless they can do max damage to you. Like, so long as you don't spend the last point, you just sit on it. You probably accrue more easily by making attacks. Just sit on it and never die. So there's got to be a stake. There's got to be a countdown timer. There's got to be a little bit of like okay, but if you don't hit at least once this turn, you're going to lose 1. So that's my solution. I think it just makes it honestly more fun, because then there's tension. There should be feel like there's a lot at stake because you're at 0 HP. It shouldn't just feel like, oh, great, now I get to go ham and go wild. I would never spend all my darkness on Inexorable ever, because that becomes a dead feature, because I'll just not spend all my darkness points and have at least 1. I probably have way more than 1. I'm probably trying to keep my aura at maximum, and you're just immortal for the whole fight. There's no stakes to it. So you gotta lose 1 darkness point at least at the end of every turn if you still have 0 HP left. That's my fix. That's the only way I see this being fair and actually kind of being more fun. But finally, that is my review of the Dread Knight subclass by Jack Wayhill from Ezmerelda's Guide to Ravenloft, a 5e product that I think more than made clear all of the things that I would tweak or change or fix to try to make it more 5.5e friendly as a design, and also just some of the little nitpicks that I have that I would modify. Honestly, I know I probably rambled for like way longer than anybody needed to hear, but I honestly love this subclass. I think it's so cool. It's so different from a lot of other things. The aura is a really cool and interesting mechanic. Everything is extremely thematic, and I was so inspired by it that I desperately want to play, which is why I spent so long thinking about it and analyzing it and considering how it could or should be adapted. Please feel free to share your thoughts on it and my suggestions in the comments. Once again, this is a pretty much brand new channel. I'm just a big nerd who loves talking about D&D and role-playing games, and clearly likes getting nitty-gritty about the mechanics and how things play in the game and what seems fair and balanced. And even if I'm not crunching the numbers on it to confirm vibes, I don't know. We're having fun, I hope. I hope you had fun. I actually really had fun. And I have so much more to say about what I would do with this subclass to actually do a build. Now that I kind of have a suggestion framework for everything that I want to fix or would tweak to make it something that I would feel comfortable bringing to the table to ask a DM if I could play, I spent like 3 hours recording, and I'm not sure how long this is going to end up being, but I spent clearly plenty of time to get through the subclass and what that would look like. I'm going to condense that down into a edited, presentable document that I can share with whomever I would want to play this with. I honestly feel a little weird about not only reviewing someone else's design in the first place and commenting on it, especially spending like 3 hours on it, but showing it off too. And like, I know people make videos where they go through the entire subclass of third-party products and things, and copyright wise, we're doing additive commentary and that's how that is justified. But at the end of the day, I want to say, go out and take a look for yourself, support the creator. There's tons more in this product alone that is worth exploring. That I mentioned the Stitcher subclass for the Artificer, and the Lichen Lupin comparisons that we could do with the new official 5e book. I mean, I feel like this author was ahead of his time in a lot of ways. Lots of great stuff in this book, not just the subclasses even. There's Domains of Dread to get into. I have so much more to explore. I'm super happy that I got this thrown in, and that my impulse purchase FOMO to grab this on Roll20 that came with this feels so worthwhile, because just doing the analysis on this one subclass alone brings me joy, and I hope it's brought you joy to go along the journey with me as we spent so much time dissecting it. But yeah, that is to say, I don't think we're done with this character, because we haven't even made this character yet. We've just sort of redesigned the subclass, and my next step is the species. Yes, apart from talking about all of the feats and other things that I would do to build out a character using the subclass, the species is another big one. And I was watching William SRD's channel the other day, who went over, is there anything below D&D's Underdark? And the Zekil half shadow dragon species lore came up in this Underdark video, and he mentioned something along the lines of, I'm surprised we haven't seen more edgelords wanting to play this cool kind of combination. They should be everywhere. And my inner edgelord agreed wholeheartedly. And then it was basically the next day that I came across the Dread Knight and was like, okay, here we've got a knight that is essentially all about the shadow and the darkness. And then you're telling me that we also have in my brain an equally dark and edgy shadow half dragon, half drow species in D&D lore. I call that a match made in heaven. So that might be the next video where I try to finish making this character. Is first thing, I might have to homebrew up a Zekil drow shadow dragon species. So that my ultimate edgelord fantasy can come true. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope you'll join me. This is becoming a whole journey unto itself to create something. So yeah, subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.